Dialogue here on Ahlebait TV. I'm Fahima Mohammed, your host again for tonight, and we have our final program for the season before Muharram, and inshallah I hope to serve you with another amazing topic with another special guest who is no stranger to the channel. I'd like to also firstly introduce my guest tonight, Syed. Assalamu alaikum. How are you?
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for hosting.
It is my pleasure. I just wanted to remind the viewers this is a live call-in show. Please do call in if you have any queries, questions, or any sort of comments that you would like to make tonight. All the opinions are of my guest panels alone, and it does not represent the channel nor anyone on the team on Ahlebait TV. Today we're going to be discussing the Assalamu alaikum. How are you, Sheikh Haneef? How are you tonight?
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much. I'm fine.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you here today. It's always a pleasure and it's an exciting topic. And obviously, you are someone who is going to be giving us lots of thoughts and insights. And we are going to be discussing the influence of modern ideology on Muslim thinking. I think it's a really interesting topic, especially with what's happening in today's world. Obviously, when we talk about modern ideology, it can obviously be categorized as political, economical, or social. And it could be a negative impact or a positive impact on Muslim thinking. So what would be your sort of starting point with regards to this topic, and what's important to raise tonight when we are talking about the influence of modern ideology, Sheikh Haneef?
Yes, I think modern ideology tends to have, it depends on what the ideology is. You know, it tends to have somewhat a positive impact or sometimes a negative impact. It all depends on what that ideology is. In other words, if that ideology is in conformity with Islamic principles, then it could be something that could enhance our practice of Islam on a socio-political level. You know, just like, for example, science. You know, if you look at the history of the Muslim world in terms of science, we see that Muslims tended to incorporate other sciences into their worldview, and they developed these sciences. They also did this with philosophy, you see, and especially where Greek philosophy is concerned, you do have certain types of, political impacts upon the Muslim world. For example, the impact of democracy. Okay, however, you might find other ideologies that might not be at all, supportive of Islam or in conformity with the Muslim ethos. Like, for example, let's say communism, or for example, to bring the situation home with respect to the identity politics that are dominating the society today, that tend to be very much widely accepted by people who belong to the quote-unquote woke culture. So it all depends upon what ideology we are talking about, that can have either a positive or a negative impact upon Islam.
Perfect. Brilliant start to the conversation so far. Syed, when it comes to Muslim thinking and us being basically influenced, how do you think that Muslims are being influenced by sort of modern ideology today? For example, in the household, what could be some of the actual examples that could be, I'm not going to talk about the positives right now, I'm talking about the negatives that we need to make aware so that we can actually get ourselves on the right track. What is it that you are, especially in your line of work, dealing with the household and a lot of issues? What are the modern influences that is happening to our Muslim thinking that's making our homes a lot more difficult to live? Syed.
Yeah, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Islamic ideology is an ideology not scared of opening up to other ideologies. And practically our leaders, like Imam Jafar Sadiq, Imam Muhammad Baqir, introduced other sciences into their seminaries and started to discuss the ideology of others and encourage the believers and students to be critical. And if there was something which is logical and acceptable, Islam is not, Islam and Muslims and Islamic society is not afraid of accepting such introduction or invasion, if you want to say. Uh, uh, so we are quite open. I mean, I think the problem becomes it becomes a problem when we become too protective and too controlling and difficult on our youth. We have to first of all bring them up and train them in an environment that they are confident in what they believe, and then we should introduce them to open up and accept and analyze and discuss other ideologies. And if there is something positive, then accept it. If there is something negative, not only reject it, but also try to make it rejected in other societies as well.
It's interesting you say that. We do have an issue nowadays that obviously because Muslims living in the West, we may be open to these other ideologies, but unfortunately we are actually now living by some of it, which does contradict our own values. So, what are the actual ideologies that we feel that are modern in today's society that's affecting our Muslim households? That's actually giving a problem, Sheikh. That's actually what we want to raise today, so that we can actually take forward to say, like, okay, we're living in the West, but our values, our beliefs, we are not actually living by the Western rules to all extent, and it should be okay because there are multiculturalism instead of having one way of thinking and believing. As we know, even if we are living in the West, they actually have their values where they are open. But are we open enough to say that, even if we are understanding, but our way is not necessarily the same way? What's your thoughts on that, Sheikh Ahmed?
I think you're absolutely right. And there are some ideologies I think that a lot of Muslims themselves accept. Okay, that are really either inimical to Islam or don't reflect Islam at all. I mean, okay, take for example democracy. Okay, I don't have a problem with democracy myself. Okay, but I remember one of the criticisms of ISIS with the Khilafah. You had a lot of Sunni Muslims saying, well, they are not a real Khilafah because a Khilafah is created through elections. Well, this is not true. It's absolutely not true. Okay? And I think what they refer to is the election of Abu Bakr, which was not really reflective of the all of the interests of the Muslim Ummah, especially, for example, that of the Banu Hashim in that time. And after that, we did not have any elections again for a caliph, ever. Okay? And so what you find in Sunni political theory, contrary to what these people are saying about ISIS, is that you have all of the different means of achieving or seizing power possible that are sort of legitimate means or semi-legitimate means of coming to power. For example, you have quote-unquote elections, you have appointments, you have the election based upon a small group of people, select group of people, and you have seizing power from the state, which is illegal. But if the person takes that power and succeeds in becoming a caliph, then everybody has to obey him, and it's now illegal to rise up against him. You see, okay? So here we have what I would call the fetishization of democracy. okay, thinking that democracy is something universal and is the best form of government, when from the point of view of Plato, it was the worst form of government because it will bring out the worst in people. And Donald Trump, and his cohorts are a very good example of that. Okay, so let's put democracy aside, okay? Because, I mean, okay, tell you the honest truth, I kind of like democracy, but it should be controlled, okay?
Yes.
It shouldn't go out of hand, but I could go back again later on and rant about democracy. Let me rant about something else.
I hear what you're saying, Sheikh Haneef. I hear
Yes.
what you're saying. I think, sorry to interrupt you, but I think I understand your point to being that when we are going in a particular way, I think our own intellect and knowledge needs to be solid first with our own belief system and culture and value in order for us to just conform to what is out there. And I think that's where society is being influenced through media and through what is now we are all becoming sheep. And if it's like, to say that, this is the modern world, this is the Western world, we've chosen to live here, so we need to just, be and be seen and integrate and be in society. Whereas I always say that as an individual, I have also a right to conform to my own values and beliefs, as long as it's not there to hurt and harm anybody, and it is also within the law of the land. You see, people get that confused, and I think that's where the problem lies. And I don't think our Muslims today, some of us, are the young ones or the current ones, whether they're in politics or education, are actually trying to be that individual. They're trying to integrate into, changing their identity on the outside to conform with ideology, which is so deemed to be modern, without understanding our own history and Islamic rules, which actually are even more advanced in some cases in the Western world. Is that where your point is coming from?
Yes, exactly. I didn't want to talk more about democracy, but I think I have to in this case, because one of the areas in which you control democracy is through the media. Okay, and when you look at the corporate media, they share the same ideological point of view of the ruling class, okay, the elite of the society. And so who the enemies of the elite are, they make them the enemy of the people. You can see that, for example, in how there's a support for ideology such as, Israeli apartheid, which you call Zionism. We see that in, how they treat Iran and these types of things. Okay. And yes, what these organizations, or these, I would say organizations, but this oligarchy, this ruling group of people whom we don't see, okay, what they do is they actually create movements and ideologies and so forth. You know what I mean? And I'm thinking about, for example, let's say the LGBTQ plus or QITVWXY plus group of people.
Yes.
Okay. I remember the last great demonstrations against Israeli apartheid violence, okay, where everybody came out. There were two groups of people. I did not see them coming out openly and supporting it, even though they claim to be people who stand up for human rights. Okay, one is the LGBTQ plus infinite organization. I never saw their flag. I did see some gays with their own little made-up placards in there, but I never saw that flag, okay, anywhere. And the other one is Black Lives Matter, okay? I didn't see Black Lives Matter coming out strongly against a contemporary apartheid situation. This tells me something, okay? This tells me that they are funded by somebody. It tells me that this is part of a particular agenda. Okay, and so they actually create causes for people to follow, and what they want to get people all wrapped up in is their own individualism. Okay, and so you had mentioned, I can follow my ideology, even as long as I don't hurt somebody else. You got to be careful about saying that, because this is exactly what they say. Okay, that's exactly what they say. And I would not be surprised if part of that plus in the future is going to be incest. Okay? You know,
Yes.
here I am and my niece, and we don't hurt anybody. You know what I mean? And we don't want to have children because we don't have any kind of people with problems and stuff like that. Why can't we have our rights? And rights now have become a kind of fetish itself. I am me. I'm different to everybody else, and therefore I need to have the same rights as everybody else that they have. And that me
Absolutely.
is something private, something personal. And I insist upon you calling me by how I want to call myself, in what kind of arbitrary type of thing there is. Okay, so this is one kind of ideology that tends to permeate the Muslim youth in this society, and unfortunately, the Muslim community, the Muslim centers, the Muslim leadership does absolutely nothing.
I'm glad you said that. That was my next question. Yeah.
Okay, to educate their children to be able to stand up to these types of things. And I think a lot of them are scared, because
Definitely.
they don't have some kind of root here. They don't have a background here to sustain them. They didn't go to high school and felt really bad when they couldn't, challenge a teacher, for example. They don't know how it feels. You see, the other ideology I think is also a very permissive one and permeates our society is this ideology of feminism. Okay, people have no idea. Okay, what feminism is. People think feminism means anybody or any system that stands up for the rights of women or for the justice for women. Okay, nobody disagrees with. I don't disagree with that. But feminism isn't about that only. Okay, feminism is about anti-patriarchy. What is patriarchy? This magic word that they always mention, patriarchy. I mean, for example, if a man, for example, physically abuses his wife in his house, they would say it's patriarchal. But let me tell you something. You know who are the biggest abusers of their partners? Lesbians. Okay, statistically, lesbians have the highest rate of really horrific spousal abuse. Okay, I mean, to the extent of sending people to hospital. Could we call this matriarchy? Right? Why do we say matriarchy? And they invent words like toxic masculinity. Like if you got too much masculinity, it kills you. It kills people. Okay. Now, when you ask the question, what do they mean by toxic masculinity? What they mean by toxic masculinity is what it is? It's violence between youth, male youth. Okay, it's a certain level of misogyny against young women. Okay, it is having no respect for society. Now, among whom do you find this type of quote-unquote toxic masculinity taking place? Among the disenfranchised, unemployed, downtrodden, racially oppressed, because a lot of them are black, okay? Racially oppressed people in society who have been marginalized. And therefore, they have to walk around and try to find some kind of dignity. And the dignity they find is in gang banging. I mean, being a gangster. Cussing in public and things like that. Now, they start saying things like, oh, well, the problem is that they don't have a man, a father in their family. That is true. But how does that fit in when we are talking about normalizing between me and my two moms and me and my two dads? How is that going to fit in with these type of people? Okay, that's one point. The other point is, okay, I got toxic masculinity. What is there something called toxic femininity? So all of these type of things is basically aimed at destroying men, destroying the male psyche, the male personality, the male nature, because men are aggressive. Aggression isn't necessarily a bad thing. In the Quran, we say, "Ar-rijal qawwamuna ala nisa." Men are the maintainers of women. Some people tend to interpret that as being just giving nafaka for marriage and bringing home the groceries and stuff like that. Nothing could be further from the truth. The kawamun of children of the daughter is to inspire your daughter with the drive to be able to be successful in a world that is competitive. That's what we mean. It's backing them up. It's teaching them somewhat of the male type of nature. This is a mother would teach her son how to love and how to be tender, right? Not to destroy his aggression and whatnot. Similarly, a father is supposed, not just a father, but any man, who can, to other young women, teach them how to be strong. We tell our kids, we tell our daughters, oh, my daughter, you have reached the lunar age of 9, and now you have to wear hijab. You're growing up now. Go to the world. And they don't know that they put the flag of Islam on their head.
Oh, unfortunately, we have lost Sheikh Haneef, but we will get him back.
Daddy,
He's been on a roll.
Yeah.
Sorry, you just kind of froze for a second there, Sheikh Haneef. So great. No, I love having you on the show, and the reason why is because you are real. You tell it exactly how it should be, and we need more leaders and speakers like yourself. And inshallah, if you ever start something, I'll be your first follower, most definitely, and join forces with you, because I do feel that we need this. This is what it's all about. When I hear you speak, it's inspiring, it's motivating, and it's more so educational, to the point where we are not just following our faith, but we are actually educating people in the entire sort of global environment, to be honest. And this is what it's all about. So it's not just there just for our faith, and this is what our religion teaches us. Syed, when it comes to what the point that our Sheikh Haneef has mentioned with regards to our Muslim community lacking in this kind of leadership, lacking in even going forward to speak, because whether they have the knowledge, whether they have the actual bravery to do so, or whatever holding them back, because they're here, they just want to be safe, stay in whatever they've given, and be quite comfortable, so that they don't shake and rock the boat there, so to say. What do you think is needed in us for us to actually counter this kind of ideology that's actually damaging our generation and the future generations to come? What do you think is needed? I mean, I am looking at some of the lectures that are coming up now in Muharram with some of the speakers, and they're listing their topics, and I have to say it has improved, where we're not just speaking about the norm, we are addressing some of the issues that even Sheikh Haneef has mentioned. But to what extent do we need more of this, and how much more do we need the actual leaders to come together to actually fulfill some of the counteraction as to what's happening, for us today?
Yes, we need to analyze the ideologies. We need to discuss this in our centers. We need to, Ulema especially, should not be afraid to open up the subject. We should, for example, I'm sure Sheikh Haneef also knows that there is a conference going to be held soon about the ulama and the Muharram and the speeches that are going to be delivered. These speeches can be used to teach our youth and youngsters how to learn from the seerah of Ahlebait wasalam, how our imams, especially if we are coming near and close to the holy, the month of Muharram, Imam Hussein's movement should be discussed in a way that it motivates the youth and people and encourages them to think why Imam Hussain, who was an Imam who could have just sat in the mosque and led prayers and ignored everything else, had to stand up and say that I will not give my hands in allegiance to a corrupt leader like Yazid or Ibn Ziyad. These points should be picked up, and then we should teach. I mean, Imam Hussein's tragedy should become a darsgah, as in Farsi we say, an institute where we could learn and teach and educate our future generations.
Brilliant, absolutely. Now, Sheikh Haneef, what would be a practical tip that you would give some young Muslim thinkers? Because we can always use the kind of like excuse that, we're bombarded by media, we are living in the Western, ideological sort of society, and how can we, sort of conform to our values and faith of Islam? So, what would you say to a young man or woman today watching and learning as to how can they improve their thinking? How can they counter this kind of bombardment? And even educate themselves if they're not even provided with certain lectures or things around them, which we're still lacking and trying to improve, because we want to take away with regards to something that we can give to our Muslim youth today. Because at the end of the day, I'm also not going to sort of just excuse the fact that we're going to have these all of a sudden these excuses, oh, it's social media, oh, it's this. And yes, there are institutes, there's big, sort of companies, there's, Western sort of, organizations or whatever they may be that has an agenda. But at the same time, we are society and we also need to take that accountability and responsibility. How would you advise a young mind, a young thinker to actually access information in this Western world where they are going to be directed and guided in the right way?
I think, first of all, they need to understand what is the nature of ideology. Okay? Ideology is a modern term. Okay? It didn't exist
Yes.
Before the Reformation. Okay? An ideology basically is a replacement for religion. People believe in ideology just like a religion. If you look at Marxism, for example, okay, and liberal democracy and Americanism and so forth, it's a religion. Ideology is a replacement for religion. When we talk about, for example, a perfect society being achieved by the coming of the Mahdi, right? May Allah hasten his return. They talk about a perfect society being founded by the implementation of particular ideas that's founded by some particular person, whether it be Marx, whether it be whoever it might be. That's the first thing they need to know. The second thing they need to know is this: ideologies are limited. Ideologies don't last. Okay, ideologies become corrupted. Most of the liberal democracies of the world today have less than 50% turnout in elections. Usually, unless there is some kind of huge crisis that they have to vote on, like Brexit or something like that. Okay,
Yeah.
Ideologies change. The Soviet Union was one of the most powerful ideological blocs in the world. Where it is today, we do not have democracy today. What we have today in places like America and India and England and so forth are really what we call, I would call, the rule of the lobby group. Okay, the rule of the interest group. The people just act as simply, legitimizing
Legitimize,
machines.
yeah.
Okay, for that government, but that government has its own agenda, and its agenda is not ours. It's for the banks, it's for the big corporations and so forth. People need to know this. We need to connect our youth to the revolutionary movements that took place in this society. It goes back to the 60s and before. We need to connect them with that. Because it is because of this rise in social consciousness at that time that led them to create new programs to suppress us. Look at, for example, the black community in America. The black community and the American Indian community were two of the ones in the forefront of the struggle. Okay? After the 60s and 70s, by the 80s, they were deliberately targeting black youth with drugs. From crack cocaine to whatever. Look at rap music. Right now, for example, a lot of Muslim ulama have no idea what rap music is. They just think it's just, corrupt music and stuff like that. Rap music in the beginning was the biggest dai to Islam. In the 80s, the majority of people who came to Islam among the black and Latin American community came to Islam because of rap music. Because rap music had a lot of Muslims talking in it. Rap music was talking a lot about social change, about police brutality, long before Black Lives Matter. Okay, it is only when the record corporations bought out the cottage industries that were producing rap. Then you had them using the F word and the B word and talking about vulgarity, to destroy the morals of the youth. When I look at posters, for example, talk about same-sex relationships and so on, diverse, they always include a black and a white. I don't see Chinese being represented there. I don't see Pakistanis being represented there. Not that I want them to be. I don't see Afghanis represented there. I don't see American Indians represented there. I see black people represented there. They got a new guy now coming out who just came out called Lil Nas. You guys probably don't know about it. It's another thing, If we are going to train our children and teach our children, we better know what they're listening to, what they're looking at. Otherwise, you have no idea what they're talking about. And I was just like a lot of these Muslim ulama out here. You know what I mean? When rap music came out, I'm like, this music is garbage and stuff like that. Until one enlightened youth said to me, uncle, if you want to talk to the youth and you want to know how they think, you listen to their music. And I did. There's this guy called Lil Nas. Nobody has any idea what Lil Nas is. Lil Nas just showed up and skyrocketed onto GQ magazine. Lil Nas was a black gay person. His first album was him making some kind of deal with the devil.
Yes.
With the devil. Mm-hmm. Okay? His latest album, had a whole lot of a video, where all gays dancing naked behind him. Of course, they blurred out the essential parts, But the prisons in America are the biggest madrasa of Islam, the biggest madrasa of Islam. Okay, where did he come out from? Where did he come from? You see, and this is what they're doing. They're actually promoting these types of things to deviate the youth, and we have to be very careful of this. So we have to teach the youth this kind of savvy. Read newspapers, look at the news, be able to read between the lines, connect with the movements before, connect with Malcolm X, connect with Elijah Muhammad, connect with all these people who went before you. To make sense of your world today. My last point is this. One of the last biggest international movements, okay, against international capitalism, which is another ideology, okay, was the 99% movement or the Occupy Wall Street movement. They were marching against Wall Street from Atlanta to Adelaide, all right, young people, but they failed. They could not bring about social change, even though this was a mass movement. And one of the reasons why they failed, according to Noam Chomsky, people don't read him, right? People, a lot of these guys who run our societies don't even know how to read English. Okay,
no,
for them to know what's going on in the society. Okay, Noam Chomsky said that these youth lacked institutional memory. What is institutional memory? It's exactly what I was talking about. Knowing what went on before. And being aware of the obstacles that will be put in front of you as had been put in front of them. For example, Black Lives Matter is marching around all over the place, mass numbers of people. But you know what a demonstration is? When you look at the civil rights movement, a demonstration wasn't just a demonstration. You march against police brutality and say, thank you all for coming and go back home. It was nothing like this. Because after the demonstration, they had what is called a teach-in. So guys, after the demonstration, we are meeting in Church X, Church Y, Church Z or Z, and we will talk about what we are all about and about the history of what we are in and how we are going to move. So in other words, demonstrations were an opportunity to attract people to a cause and educate them to a cause and create a movement. They lack
Amazing.
institutional memory.
Unfortunately, Sheikh Haneef, we have come to the end of the show. You have highlighted so many points, and inshallah, we will have you back again because what you've said is so important. And unfortunately, we do have to end, but what he has raised is so vital. And inshallah, we can only learn from this and use this to our own future and knowledge and take that in a different way of learning and living in our society today, but in the Muslim way of influence. Inshallah, we will be back after Muharram. Have a lovely evening. Thank